comments. Rachel, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Please stand. Ready, begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I entertain a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Guidelines for public comments? None? Okay. Mr. Coles, would you lead us for the study session?
This is the second one that we've been able to do, kind of give an update for the OCR investigation, and I think it's appropriate that we continue to do so throughout the years, as this is going to be a multi-year process. But there's no doubt that the Office of Civil Rights finding really was a wake-up call in how we treated our African American students. Matter of fact, it's more than a wake-up call. It's a call to action, ensuring that the treatment of all students is equal, and that the employees of VVUHSD, that we lead with understanding and we lead with compassion and empathy. The OCR findings, it left a black eye upon the district. As I think about that call to action, I'm reminded of this quote from this famous attorney, Brian Stevenson, who fights for the wrongly accused. And he quotes, when you experience mercy, you learn things that are hard to learn otherwise. You see things you can't otherwise see, and you hear things that you can't otherwise hear. You begin to recognize the humanity that resides in each of us, end quote. Before any authentic action can be taken, we must admit where we failed and take a hard look in the mirror and say sorry. We can't go back in time. We can only learn from those mistakes and make sure that it never happens again. And through this process, we've learned much, and we still have so much more to learn. But what's important is the report from OCR. It may have been the catalyst for change, but it won't be the end. We are working hard to ensure that all measures are taken so that every single student, that they have equal opportunity. As you hear today, there's much has been completed, and yet there's still so much more that needs to happen. So before I turn the floor over to Mike, I'd like to end with one more quote from Brian Stevenson. I know that some have been through more than others, but if we don't expect more from each other, hope for the better for one another, and recover from the hurt we experience, we are surely doomed, end quote. There's a movie called Just Mercy, and he fights for the wrongly accused each and every day, in Alabama. And I'm just so reminded and touched by his actions and really kind of what he's done, and really the humility that comes out of it. It says, look, you cannot move forward until you can admit where we failed and admit the wrongdoing, and it's easier to move forward authentically with sustainability. And as I look at this OCR findings, it really has to be a deep expression of, I'm sorry, here's the areas that we failed, here's what we're going to do to never make sure that it happens again. And as we continue down the road with OCR, it cannot just be about checking the boxes. It really has to be about an authentic process that includes professional development for all of our staff, and that we can continue to move forward in a direction not based on anecdotal data, but really on data that shows, and that we can continue to show through an accountability process to the public and to the school board. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Coles. Good evening, Board President, School Board Trustees, Executive Cabinet. This is our second update regarding the Office of Civil Rights resolution. So with that, turn to the next slide, please. So with that, what you're going to walk away from today is our OCR timeline and the findings, again, resolution, especially for our two new board members to make sure they know what those finding components are. The OCR agreement updates, so you're aware of where we're at within our resolution. The data that we currently have for the 22-23 school year and the trends that are existing in there. And of course, any questions that you may have at the end of that. Also, please feel free throughout the presentation, if you want to ask a question on that slide, please feel free. I know that sometimes we want to wait and you forget, and then you forget to ask that question. So please ask whenever something comes up, so thank you. Next slide, please. So with that, again, you've seen the slide before, but there is one new piece of it, of course, which is that last component, which is the OCR resolution, is which we're at now. So for those new board members, back in 2014, we got a complaint filed with us from the Office of Civil Rights. What that meant back then was there was a complaint filed due to a disproportionality of African American students who are being suspended and expelled, and district must provide all data and protocols. From that 2014 moving forward, the next one was the OCR data collection component. The OCR was asking the district during those timeframes for data regarding from Aries, regarding all suspensions, referrals, anything that was going into the system regarding all those components. And then, of course, COVID hit 2019. During that time frame, OCR recognized that the pandemic has effect on all education, and so they paused their investigation until after COVID had subsided and we were back to normal business practices in the school setting. 2021 came around, we went back to in-school setting, and again, OCR reached out again for more data, for data collection components, and what that meant was OCR had received all the data files from 2014 to 2020. OCR received the district's handbooks and protocols. And of course, there are two options at that conclusion that could have happened, which there's a findings with corrections or a stipulated agreement. Now, what happens in those, if everybody's aware of it again, option one would mean that there would be a 5-year agreement with us having to do whatever they recommended. And what I mean by that is they said, hire somebody, you got to hire somebody. What we got was actually the stipulated agreement, which we recognized that we had some faulty practices in the past. And then they gave us the resolution that we currently have to correct those measures within 2 to 3 years. So again, we are actually in the more favorable version of the compliance, but it's still something we still need to correct because of past practices, because again, as Mr. Coles had said, we got to do what's best for kids. We got to do what's best for kids, all kids, and make sure that we turn our district into the right direction. So, and then of course the last component, which was when we received this last summer, the very beginning of the school year, was that OCR resolution that you've already got copies of. Next slide, please. So with that, the OCR, of course, within their 48-page summary that we got for regarding the data, the history, and everything on it, this was the summary of their findings. I'm not going to go through it word for word. There's lots of legal terms in there, but I'm going to read the last part, which says, this included examples of racially different treatment of similarly situated students. Statistical evidence demonstrating a consistent and stark pattern of racially discriminatory effect on African American students, several noticeable departures from normal district procedures and inconsistent application of disciplinary policies, and a pattern of actions that has imposed greater harm on African American students than any other students of other races. So that was their findings. With that, though, since we've started this process, I actually meet with the Office of Civil Rights pretty much almost on a weekly basis, and they're actually very proud of where we're at right now as far as the school district is concerned. Some of the comments they have made is they're very impressed with our efforts already. Usually it takes up to 2 years to implement some of the things we've done, and we've already implemented a lot of things they've asked for correction on. Also, due to our expedited work on this resolution, they are actually behind on approving some of the stuff that we need to get done. And so we're actually waiting for them on some of those components to get approved so we can implement them in our school district. Next slide, please. Within our agreement, there are 12 items that we are required to do to, again, to get out of monitoring, to get back to, without being monitored, of course, by Office of Civil Rights. This first component here, of course, was hiring a district positive school director, and I'll talk about that in a second. Hire expert consultants to come in and help support us with some of the pieces of this, and of course, having an equity committee. Within that, we've already completed actually all of those tasks. Now, one of the things that we did that was a little bit different, though, we didn't go out and hire a new director, so to speak. What we did, of course, was we hired a coordinator, Ms. Rachel Storch, to take some of the work off of my plate so I can then focus directly on the Office of Civil Rights complaint. Within that as well, OCR has also had to give us an extension in regards to our consultant, just because he wanted to make sure we hired the right person, and of course all of OCR has to vet and approve any consultant that we hire. So their recommendation was the individual we end up having, Mr. Dr. Jason Akinofwea. He was out actually 2 weeks ago, and he came out and met with the unions. He met with Mr. Coles. He's met with all the site leadership. He'll be meeting with he's already met with the parent group. He's met with the NAACP. His job is to come and do a root cause analysis on why we are in this disproportionality. So that's his first piece of this. And then also, OCR has also provided recommendations regarding other consultants to use in the future when we start to get into professional development. Okay, next slide, please. Yes.
Can you spell his last name for me?
Oh, man.
You can get back to me.
Yeah, I'll get back to you on that one. So, but just so you know, Jason, again, it was actually something you approved about 3 board meetings ago. He's out of the University of Stanford, actually University of Berkeley. He is of Nigerian descent. His parents are immigrants. And he comes with a clinical background of history of working in Atlanta School District, Texas School Districts regarding disproportionality and creating systems of support African American students. So he comes highly recommended from multi-states as well as multi-school districts across the country. So again, so that's who who's working with our consultant components. Do you have it?
It's O-N-O, O-K-O-N-O-F-U-A.
Okay.
Start
I
again.
tried to
One
text
more
it to
time
you,
from the
but it
beginning.
O-K-O-N-O-F-U-A. Okanofua.
That was close.
Has the Office of Civil Rights worked with him before?
Yes, he's actually one of the individuals that worked with them in Atlanta on the cases they had in Atlanta.
Did they give us any recommendation that he's a good fit for our district? Or?
Yeah, they wouldn't have approved him with us unless he wasn't a good fit.
Okay.
And like I said, one of the things that we wanted to make sure on any consultant we had, they were going to actually come to our district, not do Zoom meetings, not, and he actually flew down for a week and he went to state.
Never met him.
We were actually talking about having him come this evening, but he had a class to teach, so we will have you work on that. And Mr. Coles, I don't know if you want to add anything
I
else.
certainly would like to meet who this guy is.
Hmm?
Sure, absolutely.
No problem.
So he is,
Nigerian?
Yep.
so they recommended he's a fit for us. They approved him.
I don't
Yes.
understand the fit, but,
No problem. And we'll get them, Ms. Duda, you can meet him. So,
Thank you.
okay. Now, next slide, please. So on this one here, this one we have not started yet because you cannot start an action plan unless you have a root cause analysis. So again, currently right now, Dr. Akinfoye is doing the root cause analysis component of this piece. And then once he has completed it, then we will do, of course, get our action plan created, which will help drive our professional development. And we actually had an extension from OCR till May 27th to complete this task. So this has been extended. Next slide, please.
it's going till May 27th.
Yes. So next, on this slide here, this is our revised discipline policies and practices. So currently, this is in an ongoing state. What we're doing on this one is Office of Civil Rights currently has our board policies regarding discipline. So they're actually reviewing our current board policies and are going to be making recommendations based on those board policies, so we can bring them back to you guys for first reading, of course, and final approval. So they currently have those components. As well as, too, they have our district-created intervention matrix that we created last school year. They're still reviewing that as well to give us the approval on that as well to move forward with. So those components are completed. They're just in the ongoing status with them. Next slide, please. This next component here is based on record keeping, which is one of the things in the resolution they would like us to complete. They're actually all completed, except for one piece. They would like to get an Excel sheet of our 21-22 discipline data, which we're working with IT on to get that over to them. But other than that, though, all measures of this have been completed, except for the one component, which is, of course, the last semester's data, which we just got, of course. We're going to be submitting that to them this week. And then the other part, of course, is the end of the year data, which we haven't even had yet. So those two things will be completed, of course, this next month or two. Next slide, please. This one here has not started yet because if you could see on there, it says we don't need to start this until June 30th, 2023. So it's not really needed to start yet. However, though, we actually have started doing meetings with our school sites regarding the referral data and suspension data. And we actually have a data form turned into Office of Civil Rights for approval. And on that form, though, what's going to look like, it will actually drive discussion at the school sites. It's going to be it's called a think to, like it's a plan to and do. It's what it's called, which means you look at your data. You try to assess what happened with your data, why it happened, what action plan you're going to come off of that data, and then the results at the end of it. So that's what our form's going to look like moving forward. And I'll give you guys examples of that as we start doing that process. Next slide, please. This one here, item 6, is all complete. This is not, this one's completed already. We've already done all the memos for this component. They've been approved and solidified, and so we are no longer in need of finishing item 6. It's completely finished. Next slide, please. This one here, this one has been given an extension to May 1st, and the reason why is because our consultant just started doing his assessment of our district, and with that, we can't do an action plan for training unless we don't know what we need yet. So Office of Civil Rights has given us an extension till May 1st as far as to give them what we're going to be doing for training for the next school year. They are aware this is not going to take place this year for training. This is more for getting the steps in place, what's needed, and they'll take effect next school year for our professional developments for staffs, students, parents, everybody. So again, May 1st will be our first plan as far as what's going to look like for next year. And again, we'll get you copies of that when we start creating that.
So staff means teachers, classified, and admin, right?
Everybody.
Okay, just thought I'd ask that.
Nope, great question, but yes, everybody.
May 1st of '23?
Yes, May 1st of '23. Okay, next slide, please. This one here is our student and parent information sessions. This one, we've already completed the parent version of this. This is back when, before the 2 new board members, of course, we did 2 town hall meetings talking about the Office of Civil Rights, talking about what happened to the Office of Civil Rights, the outcomes of it, the resolution itself, as well as the practices we've changed. So we've already done the parent component of this. The only part that's in process is the student information session, which will be done at the end of this month on 1/31/23. Now, what that's going to be basically is just letting the students know, not about the Office of Civil Rights complaint, but more along, here's your rights, here's what we've changed, here's the process that we've added, here's the resources, mental health clinicians, things you can ask for to help support yourself. And those will be, as I said, that presentation will be going out to students on the 31st of this month.
So we only did one thing on town hall? I thought we had a,
We did 2.
are we still doing town hall?
We haven't.
Parent town hall meetings?
We haven't, because the turnout's been really low. So the last one we had was on, something like 9 people participated in. So we're finding other ways to outreach to them. But as part of the OCR, there was 2 virtual, and then my understanding is, actually, there was 3, and then there was 2 official, part of the OCR before I started, and then there was 1 in person
Right.
that was held here too. So there's been 3 related to this parent outreach.
Oh, so what, have we stopped the town hall meetings because of the lack of
The
people?
lack of turnout in the virtual, we haven't seen a great turnout. We're trying to reach parents through other ways.
Okay.
Not related to OCR, just in general.
Can I ask a question here? Where are these town halls being held?
2 of them were virtual, and I think, before I started, virtual here when I was here, and then one was, I think, at Victor High School.
Yeah, there were
Virtual.
some at the conference in high school.
Just throw out a suggestion, okay? I just went to a funeral recently, and you'll know when I say this, it was on the other side of the tracks, okay? It was over there, and they have a little Baptist church over there, and it's a black Baptist church. We might want to consider holding some of these in some of the African-American
Yeah,
churches.
I
You go out Stoddard Wells Road, you've got some out there. If we have them there, I think that we might have a greater
In
turnout.
fact, I do have some things I need to talk to you guys about. I've already talked to some pastors and other people who will actually hold these meetings for you, you know.
We would
you-
love to actually have that.
And that's why I wanted to go over this to see what you're doing.
Hmm?
Because you're not reaching the people out there. You're just talking to us in here. And you're talking to a few people in the NAACP, but if you really want to reach some people, you need to reach the people like the people I know, you know.
Noted.
Right.
Yes.
How is it planned to give this information to the students? In an assembly or?
Technically, I'm working with the principals on it. I have a meeting. We have a principals meeting on before the 31st. We're going to talk to the principals about it. They're going to have some autonomy, though. It could be done in assembly if they want to have like their teachers, in their classes, go over it with their kids in their first period classes. It could be recorded with the principal going over it, and then of course played in the students' classes. We're just trying to figure out what's best. Of course, we don't want to interrupt the school day either, but we want to make sure they do get the information. So we're trying to different avenues of attack for the school sites, but just kind of depends on what works best for that site and that principal. But no matter what, we're going to make sure that it's given out to the students.
Can we be assured that it's not just a piece of paper given, that it's more than?
Yes, because part of the process I'm going to be doing is like we did with the original component of the memos. What I did is I actually had the school sites submit a certification that it went out correctly with video or whatever it is, and they have to submit that to me and then I give that to OCR. So I can make sure that happens for you, Ms. Edmondson.
And then maybe as a suggestion, like what Kent and Barbara were saying, that we use a robocall to let parents know that the next study session or town hall or whatever will be held at this location or that location, then we can make sure to spread it out to all the parents.
No, noted.
And if we use a lot of these, particularly African-American churches that are out there, they will contact their people for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would, no offense, but that would probably be better than us contacting them.
In fact,
And
I
to
was
use them
just
in
talking
conjunction,
to a
yeah.
pastor today about
Good idea.
having a meeting
Okay.
and a town hall meeting. And so, you know, we need to solve this. And if we're gonna solve it, we gotta actually be in the right places. And we have to deal with the people that are here,
Mhm.
not Stanford, not somewhere else, but here. So, you know, I just wished you had, whoever you chose, I just wished you had picked someone in our area or within San Bernardino County or whatever that we could deal with, much, you know, right next to us here, versus somebody out of Stanford, Berkeley, or wherever the heck they come from.
Well, there's probably pros and cons to each, but I appreciate getting fresh eyes to look at us.
Well, it isn't about fresh eyes, it's about solving the problem. That's what I'm looking at, resolutions.
Well, and to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, Miss Du, though, that's one of the reasons why, though, we did do a certain kind of, because originally the way it was written is that they want us to hire the same person to do the action plan or the consulting and do the PD as well. But under the direction of Mr. Coles, we recommended that we do a split contract. So someone who comes in and just does the root cause analysis with fresh eyes, but then we can then hire people from close by, within, even maybe within in our community, who are masters of what we need to get done. But that was the idea behind it, because originally the idea was to hire somebody to do everything. But again, what we did is we cut that in half, and we made sure we hired somebody in to do the action plan who's got history in doing these things, but then that allows us then to hire who we want for the professional development, for the trainings, for all those other pieces, like you're saying, Miss Du, to bring in people who have the boots on the ground here to do what the work that needs to be done.
I know a great resource through CTA. There's a lot of people that we could get local that have gone through this.
And here's the thing too, it's, and that one of the biggest parts that we wanted to ensure was the root cause analysis has to be done to ensure the OCR compliance. It has to be done. The professional development can come from anybody, right? It could come from our own staff who have expertise in this. It can come from, you know, local. It can come from anybody around the area. They didn't feel comfortable saying without seeing the root cause analysis that says, yo, you can do both. And that's really where the heart and soul of this is, you know, going back to what Mr. Du talked about. The heart and soul of the change process is going to come through the professional development. The root cause analysis is the catalyst that kind of drives the person who gets up in front. And here's the thing too, is we don't want this to be a one and done. It can't just be, okay, we checked the box, everybody went through a 1 hour training. It doesn't work. It has to be, you know, a continuous process that becomes infused a part of this culture in the school district. I'll give you like a great example is like the Heritage Program at Adelanto. It's a great program that targets our African American students, you know, to complete A through G. We see it working. It's a great program. It can't stop there though. It needs to expand to all of our schools and continue, you know, targeted, efforts, because you can see what works, and then to expand it to all students, and to continue to do it. One and done stuff, it doesn't work. It needs to be kind of an investment and a commitment from all of us. It says this is really important. And it's important enough to actually have people who will do it and continuously do it, so it becomes infused as a part of the fabric of this district.
And so one thing on, you know, the advisor, consultant, whatever you want to call it, you know, I've talked to some people from other districts that have gone through similar things, and getting somebody that is, how would you say, a proven product with OCR, because they know their language, their wants, what information they need. It'd be like me doing an accreditation. Okay, Kent knows the ins and outs of that, what everybody wants, where I would just say, well, how are things, you know? Or maybe I would have a different vision of what needs to be done than somebody that does it, and they're recognized by the organization that's in charge of the whole thing.
Well,
He'd
and-
wanna see the wrestling program. He'd wanna see the whole thing.
Well, the wrestling program is important, but, you know, there are other things.
You know, I think the other thing too is as we think about the Office of Civil Rights, they're not educators, they're attorneys.
Yeah.
You know, and so they're not educators, and so what we've had to do is find this balance of working through this confines of this legal system, not being attorneys ourselves, you know, with an agreement that has been signed, I think back in July, that really stipulated the agreement, you know, and the commitment to the district, to attorneys, and if we don't follow in those agreements, there's legal ramifications to that. And so we're trying to balance that, the legal parts of what needs to take place as we're dealing with the attorneys to what really will matter in supporting our students and our staff, so that what took place doesn't happen again. And not only do we just fix it, that we get better because of it.
Well, with that clean sweep that we had, that was a confusing situation. I don't even know when the principals got the memo to say, okay, we don't do clean sweep anymore.
Mhm.
So it's all a lot of things. It's not just one or two things. I mean, we counted 7 kids at least multiple times that added to the count. And then we had also at least 4 kids that were done twice over, and your special ed kids were included in that. I mean, it was a mess.
Mhm.
So this guy is supposed to be picking up all of this data from
No,
past?
his job is not that. What his job is to coming.
What is he doing?
So he comes in, he meets with the community, he meets with the staff, he meets with everybody, the teachers organization, and to find out what's going on, why we're where we're at. His job is to get anecdotal data as well as our data to find out why we are where we're at. And then to go from there to make recommendations on how we can then curb the behavior, if it is, be it, implicit bias, to just systems that are broken, to make those recommendations. And that's why, again, what we've done is we've allowed it so that he's not doing everything. He can come in and make the recommendations, and then now it's up to us
He's
then.
meeting with community people?
Yes, he's already met. Like I said, he's met with the NAACP. He's actually going to be coming back down and doing a parent forum, and we could do one, of course, at one of those churches you're talking about. He wants to know what's going on from a perspective that's not our perspective. He wants to hear from everybody about why it's working the way it does. These are the same things he's did in Atlanta, like I said, Texas. He just came back from Florida. He's done a bunch of different communities where he goes in and he goes and finds out what's going on, why is it happening, and then make recommendations to those districts on how to, again, like Mr. Coles is saying, make it the fabric of the district moving forward so that these things do not happen again.
Mike, I really appreciate you explaining that, because I was really concerned at first, and no offense to Stanford or Berkeley, wonderful schools, but they're not Victorville. They're not,
No.
they're not us.
even
They're not us.
Southern California.
Yeah. But anyhow,
I
but
already
now
know.
I think I understand. You've got the legal
Not gonna
entity
work.
that has to be filled out, forms and stuff like that. And he's an expert in that. But now we can pick somebody, which I'm going to use the term local, because that's important to me. You get somebody local who really knows what's going on here in Victorville.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, and
Correct.
that person or persons, okay, can really help us. So I appreciate you telling me, because that helps me understand a
Yeah.
lot better and feel.
No, it
about
does.
this.
The outcome.
And he's Nigerian, and he's an immigrant. I mean, my God.
Well,
All of those things are not
Well, let me-
relating to a person who's been here since 1500.
Well, let me go back a little bit on that though. He is Nigerian descent. Remember that. His parents came from Nigeria. He was born in Memphis, Tennessee. That's where he grew up, is in Memphis, Tennessee.
Great.
So, but I'm just saying though, he's Nigerian descent. It doesn't mean he's not coming from Nigeria. He's actually Memphis, Tennessee, and then moved. He got a scholarship, or he went to Berkeley and graduated from
Born and
Berkeley.
raised here, so that's-
Yeah, he's born and raised in America. So again, but I agree with you though on the aspect that
don't care.
whoever comes after this component should be someone local, someone who knows our community, someone, again, like Mr. Coles was saying, it could be someone within our whole district itself. I know we have Dr. Jackson over at Adelanto High School could probably do some of this work for us for, culturally responsive teaching. So we have people embedded. And again, it goes back to make sure, like you said, Mr. Crosby, bringing people in who know the community after this to do our professional development, who have accolades and know what's going on in the area.
And on that, Barbara, you would know a lot of people. You could probably give some good suggestions on that.
Exactly.
And Rosie, you know, we've all been here a long time. I mean, so, you know, we'd all have suggestions, but I think that would be good for have some input and stuff like that. I think that's great. So thank you for clarifying that for me. I appreciate
And
it.
Apple Valley has, was it Tahari, I believe his name is, at Apple Valley High School?
I think so.
He was really involved
I
in it.
think he moved.
Did he move?
I think so.
Well, it shows how much I
Because he
know.
was at state council. I'll ask about
Yeah,
it
it
this
could be,
weekend.
'cause,
But bottom line is OCR approved this gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
So they must have checked out his credentials and everything else and his background.
Mm-hmm.
So with their approval, and like you say, he's only going to do this portion of it,
good guy.
it makes sense to bring somebody local to do the rest of it.
Exactly. And that's the one thing we have to, as we move forward, though, and anyone we do bring that's local, though, we have to still vet them through OCR.
Yeah.
And again, they have to have, evidence that they've done something somewhere else. There's evidence of it working. There's evidence of it being carried forward. That wasn't like Mr. Cole says, it wasn't a checkbox, that there's still evidence showing that, like, let's say it's Snowline. I'm just using an example, right? So when Snowline brought somebody in, they did these trainings, and now Snowline's got this great program that's been, accoladed on. We'd want to reach out to that person to come and do something with our district. So, but again, all that stuff has to go through OCR too as well, as far as vetting, just to make sure that we are meeting what their standards are.
My problem is that I've been here so long, it'll go back to where it was. It'll end up back in the same place it was before. Understand. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I understand what you're saying, but I know under Mr.
We
Cole's
can do
leadership.
all these little things, but we gotta ensure that it's really effective and
Mm-hmm.
efficient in the manner in which we do this.
Correct.
But we got to start someplace.
Yes. And I,
Let me just kind of address one thing.
Go ahead.
This-
No, we aren't starting. We're actually doing, this is not the first time. This is more than one time
Mhm.
that this has happened. So that's why we gotta make sure that this is done correctly.
One of the biggest challenges at OCR, and it's hard. We've had a lot of OCR investigations over the years, and
Yes, we have.
and the thing of it is you're dealing with attorneys. In hindsight, 2020, our attorney should have been dealing with their attorneys, attorney to attorney, and the agreement was signed, and so we have to follow this agreement. This is a stipulated agreement. One of
Is
the-
that you?
I think you guys are calling each other.
I am sorry. I thought that was off. I apologize.
Pizza's here.
He didn't even know it was his phone.
I am so
Scary.
sorry.
That's scary.
One of the biggest components of this whole thing too, I mean, go back to 2014, and what has been changed in this district, because it kind of goes back to what you were talking about, is the data record keeping system was so convoluted that we had to give them the data from 2014 that really was an anecdotal hundreds and hundreds of pages, and they had to sort through it, instead of what you're going to see is very concise data reporting system so that we can see red and green areas of growth and areas of not, so that we can immediately make changes. The record keeping, back in 14 and so on and so forth, it could have been 100% accurate, and a lot of these findings may not even be truth. But because some anecdotal was in there, some of it may have been truth. They had to interpret all of this data over these years and then try to come up with their own conclusions to the whole thing. And it really makes it complicated when the data record keeping system wasn't as accurate as it is now. Where now, if they ask for something, it's a matter of us just importing it and sending it.
Well,
and
now we're, like the other day, a parent showed up from down there at Victor, and she's talking about her kid going to, what is it? Something like a
Independent study?
independent study,
Mhm.
or a study?
Independent
And they're
study.
going to study hall, or
Mhm,
is that
OCI.
at the school?
OCI is at the school.
Right, OCI is at the school, okay. Now, I'm sitting here listening and I'm going, wow. Now, she was saying they're not learning anything in that OCI area or that room.
Mhm.
So I'm saying, oh, wow, this is another thing going on where we're gonna end up again down the road with what we're dealing with right now today. See, we've already dealt with this more than once, not just one time.
Multiple
I've been
times.
here like 28 years,
Mhm.
not one time, more than one. But it was done specifically the way that people set it up without getting real input from the community itself, the real community itself, not just this school
Yeah.
or a few people that you bring in.
Totally understand.
Does that make sense?
No, it does.
You understand what I'm saying?
I totally do. It's
Right.
just to
I mean,
kind.
we've been sued behind the fact that we gave out Fs and Ds and a pattern that teachers had, that over a 3-year period, we had to report that. All that information about how these teachers and who are these teachers that give all these Fs and Ds and flunk 25% of their students. There's a reason that I asked for that. It's because we were sued. So it is not just something that we just look at and we say, okay, we're gonna work this out.
No.
We gotta actually make sure that we make it efficient and effective enough that it really does affect our school district.
No. I agree with you, Ms. Du, 100%. We need to make change, and we're working on making change, but it's got to be everlasting change. It's not to check a box off.
Right.
It's to make sure that, that the kids in our school now, that their kids come in and they get the fair shake that they need,
Exactly.
that their grandkids can come and get
And
the
the
fair shake.
grandkids,
Yes.
and the
And
other
it goes
kids,
on
they
and
know
on
them
and
all.
on. And I'm with you, and I know that Executive Cabinet is with you on that. We're all in. We're all in, and we hear you.
Okay, point of clarification. Okay, now, the student in question was placed into OCI? Okay, because they said independent study.
I can clarify all that for you right now if you like, because I actually met with that parent and then also with the sister as well. So I've already met with those two
Well,
individuals.
no, my point is, unless the law's changed, a student can't be
No.
forced to go into independent study or an alternative program.
That is correct.
Okay, so it was OCI,
No, well, here's the thing, and let
which
me
is an independent study.
let me go back. Let me kind of clarify for you. Okay, so we had to make some corrections down there. I met with the principal down there to talk about
Here's
this.
the only thing too is probably needs to be best in a memo only because we're recording live
Yeah.
and you can't really tip off what's happening for a particular student.
Thank
Okay,
you,
well,
Mr.
that's fine.
Close.
That's fine,
But
but
we
I
will
was just
absolutely
saying.
get you all the details.
okay.
I just don't want
But-
to break any
but-
confidentiality with the student.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cole, for I forgot. Thank you that.
Right,
But I can
Good
get you a
point.
memo on that though. But you are correct on both points.
Okay,
The
good.
first point is a kid cannot be placed in independent study unless it's voluntarily by the parent,
Yeah, okay.
or if they're 18 and over and they can do it
Because
themselves.
that just created another
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. So you are totally correct on that.
Okay.
So, any other questions on that? Okay. Next slide, please. So on this one here, this is the public available of discipline data. Now, we are not required to start this yet, but we've actually done this repeatedly with, we've had board workshops, we've done presentations on the OCR report and the current data. So we're actually already meeting a lot of these requirements yet, but we haven't had to start it quite yet because again, it says not till April 30th of this school year. And again, on July 30th and every year after that, we have to do our board workshop or a public presentation on our data. But again, we've already started doing this. We give it to you guys on I think almost on a board meeting basis where you get the most recent referral data, the most recent suspension data, and again, like I said, we do other avenues where we make sure the information's out for parents as well. Only thing we have to do is just get a solidification from OCR on what would be their approval, checkbox for them. How do they want to make us get out? Do they want like a website also, like a link on the website? What do they want? And I'm working with them on that, but again, it's not on the forefront because again, it's not due till April 30th. So we have not started this one quite yet. But again, this one will be an easy one to check off once we kind of get to that component. Next one, next slide, please. This one here, we actually started this one here in the district as per the timeline has requested. However, though, we've kind of reached a standstill. And what this one was to clarify for everybody was Office of Civil Rights requested some changes to our VVPD, Victor Valley Police Department, and our Sheriff Department's MOUs on how they handle students at the school sites. So we actually created a new MOU with the recommendations from Office of Civil Rights. However, though, there was some language in there that the departments were uncomfortable with, and so they asked to work with the Office of Civil Rights directly. So we've kind of passed this on to the Office of Civil Rights, and they're working directly with the attorneys of the Sheriff's Department and Victor Valley Police to make the MOU happen. And then that'll be really for the 23-24 school year, those changes.
Is there a database, for lack of a better word, of other districts that have been through this and solved this problem? So you can ask them and say, hey, how did you guys settle this law enforcement snag?
So, like, here's an example of that. Like, they're asking us to control something from another entity that we can't control.
Right.
That's one. And, you know, kind of going back to, like, this whole thing with OCR to kind of address some of the concerns, in hindsight's 2020, you know, when this was signed, is to work with the Office of Civil Rights about results. Instead of checking their boxes, you say, listen, this is the results that we want to get. Can you agree to these results with these timelines? Give us the autonomy to do it. We'll get you the results. Instead, what's happening is like they're like, you have all the accountability, but they control all the strings.
Well,
And
it also dealt with that clean sweep. I went to several meetings that we had with San Bernardino County that dealt with clean sweep, and a lot of it has to do with clean sweep.
Sure.
And many districts kind of had a problem with some of the clean sweep because it would just actually decimate some of the districts, so up here in the desert and all over San Bernardino County. So it has to do with clean sweep.
Well, and so like we're having to work with law enforcement, and on this case here, so I can't force them to say, here's the new MOU, sign it. So it's, you know, rightfully so, we're like, you deal with them, and they're like, this isn't even our investigation. We've got enough of our own investigations.
Right.
You
It
know,
has
so
to
they're
do with
trying to
clean
work with
sweep.
us, but that's just another example of this, of what's in this agreement, that we can't even control this, and so we hope.
That would be perhaps another reason why, like, your nephew who's, I think it's your nephew, isn't it? Your nephew who's the head of the Hesperia School Police Department. Now you'd have direct control over it if we had our own police department here. Something that we should consider at least. It would give us more control, and then we can't say, oh, well, it's this entity's fault, because now that entity is part of us, and now it falls back on us. So
Right.
that's something, again, to consider.
Well, it's almost like everything we're faced with, right? This is a great example of, like, take the LCAT, right? It's called the Local Accountability Control, but where's the local control anymore, right? Here's all the things you have to do. And it's the same thing
Still
with this thing. It's
mandated.
just, and I think all of us would agree as a team here, we'll take the responsibility for accountability and give us the autonomy to do it. That
Right.
fits the needs of this unique community, the unique needs of this schools, and the unique needs of each of us. And
Yeah.
you get these entities, you know, like the Office of Civil Rights, and they think that they know best, and they're not looking at it through the lens of the uniqueness of here. They're looking at it through the lens of federal law. And rightfully so, but there's not like a whole lot of flexibility in this. And so it makes it
Right.
more difficult.
And it is
Well,
like,
you know, San Bernardino-
your LCAP, you know, oh, the LCAP's local control. Oh, but the county's gotta approve it, the state's gotta approve it. So
by the way,
basically,
here's all the
they should
restricted
just
money
tell
you
you
have to
what to
spend it.
write and save you a
Yeah.
lot of money.
That's right. And so there's just, it's one of these
But,
things.
you know, when they put that together with that clean sweep, they didn't really, they just did it through the county. And then said, okay, you can do it. But they did not ask, basically, schools, their input. They just kind of said, okay, we're using clean sweep to get rid of everybody, all these people.
Well,
you
you
know?
look at the county, how come they're not enjoined in this with us? You know, they're the ones who approved it.
Exactly.
I get it.
So yeah, back on this one. Again, it's just basically, like I said, it is ongoing. We've done our job, which is we've sent the MOU in. We've tried to work with our law enforcement agencies on the MOU. But Office of Civil Rights, though, again, is taking the lead on this one now to negotiate with the police department on what the MOU look like for 23-24 now.
So Mike, you have down here that they're working with the Victor Valley Police Department, but also with
And also the
sheriff.
sheriff, yes, also Adelanto.
Good, okay.
Yes, also the sheriff's department. Any questions, more questions on the MOU one?
No, that makes sense. They're a bargaining unit for something outside of our purview.
Okay, next slide, please. This one here, number 11, we are actually pretty much completed this one as well. This is our student, staff, and parent survey, climate surveys. We've made some adjustments to those surveys, asking some key questions about equity at the school sites. Some of those questions are things along the lines of, do you feel that discipline is handed out, based on race or ethnicity? And some other key questions asking those components. And then once I have all that data, I'm going to share it with you guys as well for our first round. We just got the parent survey, just was completed this last weekend. So once I have all that data, I'm going to give you all that data so you guys can take a look at it. But in regards to OCR is concerned, we have actually completed this task. The only thing that's ongoing is just once we get at the end of the school year, we get all the data in, what are we going to do to make changes? So like if we get the parent survey back and it says, hey, we see some discriminatory practices in your schools, they're asking us what's our plan to address that, right? Just not ignore it.
Okay, when that question is asked, then the next thing logically should be, what group do you feel? Because just targeting, okay, African Americans are the only ones. You go down to Victor Valley High School, there's a large Hispanic population. A lot of those kids feel they're singled out. Things like dress code and stuff like that. Juan wears something, he goes to in school, Johnny does the same thing and he doesn't get it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because if it's a problem, it can't just be the problem with one group. It has to be a whole blanket thing that we take care of everybody, so everybody feels they're being treated fairly.
No, and you are correct. And that's one of the things we did actually add to our surveys, though, was an ethnicity question, because we still want them to be anonymous. Because when people think that their emails are tracked or their phone number or something's going to be in there, that they won't be quite as honest. So what we did, though, is we just added an ethnicity question in the beginning of it to identify what ethnicity that person is. That way we can attach it to the questions that are in hand.
We're allowed to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
as long as we are not attaching it to any other components like ID, anything else in the directory. So as long as we are being very vague and we're not collecting other data, email addresses, phone numbers, names, we can ask that question. Once you start attaching other components like name, phone number, email, things like that, now it becomes a tracking issue, and we don't want that to happen.
There are some of these students that feel other groups are favored over them. Okay, and I'm not talking white students.
Yeah.
Okay?
No, I agree. And like I said, we're definitely going to look at that data for you guys. And once I have it tabulated, I'll get you guys that data so we can have some conversations about that. But again, like this one here is pretty much completed. It's just now about looking at the data and then what changes we're going to make to help support that data moving forward.
Was any of this data in the panorama study that you shared with us last week?
Yes, actually it is. The student one was not quite up to date yet because we had to make some issues with that. So the spring panorama data will have those ethnicity, race questions in it. But the staff one that you just got, that was last week, that does have those questions in it. I believe they are under the school climate question heading, and there's 4 questions on the bottom of it that actually talks about discipline, race, ethnicity, those components in there. So you can feel free to take a look at those.
Just a final question on the date. It says June 30th, 2022.
That's a typo from
So that's a
OCR.
typo, okay.
That's a typo from OCR.
Shame on them.
A typo.
All right, next one, last one of the items that we're addressing. This is the compensatory education component. So with this one here, we've done one piece of it, of course, which is identifying students that are under the OCR list who are discriminated against, who lost time in classes, who maybe didn't graduate, who maybe lost credits. So we have identified those students. We've actually provided that list to OCR, and we actually did this in a 2-prong attack. So what we did is we found 180 students that are non-grads. They've already left us for the most part. They're non-grads. We've sent them letters offering them services to get their high school diplomas, to make sure that they can get their high school diplomas and move forward on. We've had roughly 11 students take advantage of it so far. 6 students are currently enrolled in our adult ed program, and we've also provided bus passes and computers to them to make sure they can get their education done, as well as FEV tutoring. And then also we have 5 actually graduate already, and now they're moving on. So we've identified that, so that's been a success of this component. I hope we can get all 180, but it's hard because once they've left us, who knows where they go.
Yeah.
They're to the wind.
The other part is we're doing the other prong of this, though, is we've identified 300 current students who have also been, had these practices used against them, which either lost them credits or other things. So OCR currently has that list and reviewing it to just make sure it's accurate for their sake. And what we're going to be doing with them is we're going to be offering a program through Edgenuity. It's a tutoring. It's not a tutoring program. It's actually a curriculum program that they can get credits back on. So it's kind of like Accelis or Apex, but there's a teacher there. So they're not just on a computer by themselves.
It's like a virtual thing?
It's kind of like a virtual thing, but we'll be able to use that credits that they receive and put it on their transcripts. And so we're going to be able to catch those kids up if they have any discrepancies from missing out on 10 days of OCI or suspend or whatever it is, right? And they lost out and didn't pass a class. We can now get them caught up and passing a class. As well as, too, we're going to be working on with a couple of different programs up here to offer some mentorship programs. And I would love to actually, Barbara, to talk to you later about maybe some people up here who can help support us in that mentorship program. Because we want to find somebody who can who knows the community, who's up here, who can mentor some of these kids to get them, hey, don't stress on what happened in the past. Let's get you caught up and let's get you graduated onto VVC or whatever you want to do. So if you can help me with that, some names, I'd appreciate that. But that's the next step. We're just waiting for the approval from OCR on our plan. And once we get it, we're going to enact that plan for those 300 students. And I'll let you know once that is enacted, of course. So any questions on the compensatory education component?
Is there any other way that we can reach out to them? I mean, Facebook or somehow, or on our website?
You mean the 180 kids, the non-grad? We have actually done on our website, there is a link on there saying, hey, you might qualify for this, contact my office, we can get you enrolled. We've done letters. We can do some big things on Facebook and stuff like that. I think we're going to my next step is actually, I know that Mr. Cliff Harris has a newspaper up here.
He has the American and it's in San Bernardino.
Yeah.
He brings it up here, though.
But those kids could be down the hill, so we're thinking about doing is maybe putting just a little ad in there. Hey, if this happened to you during your history in our district, contact Mr. Williford or my office to see if you
You
qualify.
can also use the Daily Press. and
Yeah,
all the rest of
that's
it.
our next step.
And the Sun.
In the Sun. So that's our next step, and then again, we're gonna try to do the best we can on that. But OCR does recognize, though, it's hard because you're trying to capture kids who've left and they may have moved out of the state.
And if you made a flyer of some sort,
Mhm.
I can make sure it gets distributed to a lot of different organizations here.
Okay, I'll get that to you. We actually do have one, so I can get that to you.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yep, I can get that to you.
He's on it.
All right, next slide, please. So this one here, again, just kind of a summary of what's currently in process. The OCR consultant has met with our district leadership team, site leadership, VVTA, CSCA, NAACP, in developing the root cause analysis only. That's all they're doing right now. OCR is working with the VVPD and Sheriff's Department on that new MOU. OCR is reviewing lists of our students for compensatory education. And the district is developing a data review protocol sheet, like I was telling you about, the Think, Do, Plan, Act that we were talking about. The items that have not been started yet are district action plan, because we have to wait on the root cause analysis. The trainings are based, of course, on that action plan. They're kind of a domino effect. And the last piece, of course, is that release of public data. Those are the three big components we have not started yet. Next slide, please.
Question. The second bullet, it says working with the VVPD. Does that include the Sheriff's Department?
Yeah.
Okay.
I always forget that we have the two entities, but we are working with both of them. This one here is just our most current suspension data. So on this one here, if you want, it's probably easier maybe to look behind you. I know it's always just kind of blurry on, you try to streak them on these slide decks. So we've actually had on here, last year at this time, our end of second semester, our first semester, I should say, we had roughly 796 suspensions last year at this time, okay? This year, we are currently at 626 suspensions. So we've actually reduced our suspensions by 170 suspensions compared to last school year alone. So there are some things that are going in the right direction. If you look also below that, I'm looking at the very far right column. That's where the total end of the year stuff is. So on that, you'll see on there that if you go down, all of our schools are actually in the green for the most part. They're all reduced their suspensions by some in double digit, some in single digit. And we only have 3 areas that we need to kind of work on as far as they actually went in the wrong direction as far as our suspension totals are concerned. When you look at those numbers with percentages on there in the middle of it, those are by our demographics. So again, if of course we have our special ed population listed, our African American population, our Hispanic population, Asian Pacific Islander, foster and homeless kids, you can actually see on there that a lot of our categories are going the right direction. White means, of course, we're not any discrepancy in there. We're actually in a good spot with the white numbers. The yellow numbers means a cautionary area. We can go up or we can go down. We're not bad yet, but if we don't make some changes, we could end up in the wrong area of disproportionality. The areas in the red are the areas where we have some disproportionality. And so we got to kind of focus on those areas to see what's happening, what interventions are in place, and what's going on. But the one thing I want to make sure that, again, that I do reiterate, though, and I told you guys last time we started this whole process, the Office of Civil Rights never said that we cannot discipline students. What they said was we have to make sure that we're equitable in how we administer our discipline practices. And so, again, it goes back to making sure that if African American students are being suspended, are they being given the interventions the same that a Hispanic student would get or a white student would get? Are they getting the same protocols happening across the board? So I want to make sure that's kind of clear. Like, we're not telling anybody they can't suspend kids. We're not telling them they can't give referrals to kids. It's about, are we doing the practices to support those kids if they do get in trouble? That's what OCR is about, talking about. They want to make sure that if an African American student is getting in trouble for dress code and they get 2-day suspension, I'm just using an example, and a white kid does the same thing but gets lunch detention, that's what they're concerned about. There should be equitable practices regarding whatever discipline is administered. Yes.
So there should be an equitable MTSS at every site that's supporting it, whether they use PBIS or something else, but it falls under that umbrella that every student is getting the support they need where they are.
Correct. Correct. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle, especially when we talk about Office of Civil Rights. People think that, oh, we can't do certain things. That's never what they said. What they said was the practices need to be equitable across the board. And that's one of the things why we were in where we're at with OCR, because it was not equitable as far as those practices in those 2014 years and on.
And is that message getting transferred to admin, certificated, classified? Because you go to any site and ask them, well, what's going on? Oh, we were told we can't suspend kids. And that's not the case. We can't unfairly suspend kids. And we need to be consistent with what we do, which, hey, it's just simple. The law's the law. You broke it, you get the same thing. And that should make all this stuff a moot point. Some people said that for years, like Crosby he was always tough on kids. But every kid that did something wrong, they got dealt with one way or another. There was no, he had blinders on, so to speak, all right? And that's the kind of thing that you don't get a lot of things. So, like I say, he was one of the tougher teachers on campus, but you rarely heard, well, he did this because I'm this. He did this because I'm this. Most of the kids finally fessed up and said, well, he did it because I did it. So.
Well, and I do think the message is that they can still suspend. I mean, it's nice to see the numbers going down, but we're still at 626.
So are the incidences going down? That's all is my question.
And I haven't had time to look over this, and I'll look over it later. I want to have more time. But this over on the far right-hand side, the ISS, in-school suspension,
Correct.
okay, and they're all zeros.
Yep.
So they're not, okay. The OSS is out of school?
Out of school suspensions.
Okay, I've got to go to the last one, Victor Valley Virtual Academy. How in heaven's name do you suspend a kid who never shows up to campus? Because it's virtual.
That's true, but there are some protocols you do as far as like if you are sexual harassing or if you are showing inexplicit pictures. There's ways that you could be suspended where you're breaking ed code.
Okay, so those kids are actually being, what do we do? Take them off the computer?
Basically, that's basically what it is in a nutshell. It's for a day maybe, but again, there's only one. It's like far and few between.
Well, it says 3 down here at the bottom.
Oh yeah, it's 3. You're correct.
Okay, so and that's what we do. We just say you're banned from the computer for 3 days then?
Or whatever the thing is. Yeah, basically it would be just like you would do a suspended kid at school.
Okay,
So-
because I'm just looking at that and I think, all right, how do you, send them to their room or something? But okay, but
But I'm sure I guarantee there's also conversation with the parent though regarding, this is what they did.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like your parent's on there, your student puts pornography in the chat, like that has to be dealt with, so.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
For the column that says teacher, does that mean there have been no teacher suspensions across our district?
As far as I'm aware of what we run the data, no.
Would that be in Aries?
That would be in Aries. So I can actually go back and I'll look at that data again though, because I do know I've heard there are some out there. So I got to figure out where the Aries issue is at, which Mr. Coles is talking about regarding proper record keeping. So there's either a issue on the back end when we run the data as far as it being recorded correctly, or it's on the front end. So those are things we have to look into still. But yes, but there hasn't been, no, there wouldn't be that many compared to our normal suspensions though.
Yeah, because if this is the case, there's nobody, exercising the right for teacher suspension for their 3 days, which I know that can't be true.
No, just today, the rest of today and tomorrow.
Yeah, it's 2 days.
Well, you can do it 3 days according to Ed Code, if I remember right.
No, that's what the administrator can do, but the teacher can only do.
Ed Code is
the
2
rest of
days.
today and tomorrow.
Ed Code is 2 days, and you have to do 5 days till you can do another 2 days.
All right.
48, 9, 10
Yeah,
versus
48,
48, 9, 10.
But I still agree with you, Jose, that to see that there's been no teacher exercise the right to suspend a kid from the class for the whole year, that would be surprising to me.
It surprised the heck out of me, and I was about the least suspending person in the world.
And I never suspended a kid out of class, but that's, like you said, I was strict and I handled things my own way, but that would still shock me to see no suspension.
Yeah, that's why I think there probably is a,
I said I'll do that. I'll do some digging in IT to find out what's going on with that on the back end. Because again, we run the data on the back end, and that's what how the data
Oh, yeah,
comes up.
because if
So.
something like this if it's correct, great.
Yeah.
But chances are there's something here that's
Especially
not
in a high
right.
school
And
district.
somebody's
Yeah.
gonna bring
You
it
know you're
up,
gonna
oh, see,
have
but you said
suspensions.
this and it's this, and it wasn't the case. Because I know we want to, report the stuff correctly, because if we're putting everything out here, they should give us the benefit of the doubt when we're improving on things.
Correct. So like I said, I'll do some digging on that one though, because again, it could be on the front end or the back end. It depends on how administrators are putting in the system as well. So again, it might need to be more training on that component, but I'll do some digging and I'll let you guys know at the next board meeting, or give you a memo for next board meeting.
Rachel, really quickly, you've been involved with a lot of this. Would you say that probably more training for administrators on how to put that into areas would be appropriate?
I would agree. I would agree that I would think that part of that OCI component was to express all this information to administration, and that did happen at the beginning of this current school year.
Okay.
This information was shared with administration. I was still an AP at the time, so I did attend that training. And so there was that explanation of how to put in information correctly. And so I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing a lot of green, is because things are entered in appropriately. But then also to lend to some of this, I think your data is all day out of school suspensions, and a teacher can't suspend for all day out of school. So that is why the teacher information is 0, because a teacher can only suspend for a period. And
right.
these are admin suspensions, and these are all day.
Okay,
So
well,
this
then
is all data.
that would make sense then. So
And that's
why-
these are not teacher
and that's why
period
it's 0,
suspension. This,
correct.
you're talking all day only. Okay, well, then
Yes.
are there no
all day.
classes self-contained, like special ed?
But that still would not be, because we're a high school, so students are
High
per
school.
period. So if you are suspended, you wouldn't be suspended. A teacher couldn't suspend you for every period when an incident happened in first period.
But what if they were self-contained?
But
like
that would,
sped?
it still wouldn't be, because they don't just get one grade, they get a per period grade. So even
Okay.
students who are on certificate of completion get 7 passes or 7 fails per period. They don't just get one grade. So these are out of school suspensions all day, and that's why the teacher information is 0.
Okay,
why.
that makes sense. Thank you.
That's why.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, a teacher suspension doesn't have to be out of school.
Correct.
No, it usually isn't. It usually isn't,
It's-
but
He
it's
said you
also
back
by
halfway through the
period, not
period.
by the whole day. So that would make sense, okay.
And I think that's where it also gets tricky too, because I know as a former elementary school teacher, if you did a teacher suspension, it is all day.
Yeah.
Not at my
It-
school though.
So
My school is run like a junior high where they have periods.
yeah, you have periods at your school, but in a typical elementary school, you'd have the same kid all day long. So if you did do a teacher suspension, that would be an all day, and it would
Go
count
cool
that way.
kids,
So
In
so
our
that makes
school it was all day.
Could I ask something?
sure.
When I went to school, when you got suspended, you got suspended. Everybody knew what that meant. What's the difference between in-school suspension and outside school suspension?
Per the state of California, nothing. It counts the same. But the problem with an in-school suspension is you have to have a place to put that student, because they cannot be in any teacher's classroom. That's against ed code. So then that student either has to sit in the office all day long with an administrator or a classified member. And then you can put them in OCI, but it has to be tagged correctly. Because one of the reasons why we were under investigation anyways, because OCI was being used as a hidden suspension room. And so you can't put kids in there unless it's kind of a last case scenario now. Because OCI should be, like the lady who came last week, right?
Exactly.
She said, we need to make sure that interventions happen there. It's not just a place to go and hang out. And most of our schools actually do that. We had a conversation already with Victor High School on that situation. They're correcting that issue. But it should be to where if a kid is in trouble, right, they go there, the mental health clinician pulls them out, has a conversation about anger management, whatever it might be with them, and then they can go back on their school day and finish their learning. And so, but again, so that's kind of the difference, Rosie, on that, is that in-school suspension, it still counts to the state, but you'd have to put them somewhere on your campus to where they're out of the way for the day. Whereas outside is they just go home, and they just go home and come back when their suspension's over.
Yeah. But when they started that down at Victor, the deal was, well, number one, the student's suspended at school, so all they gotta do is just send somebody to that teacher's room and say, I want Johnny's work. So they can get the work done, because out of school suspension, they're gone 3 days, and then, the teacher gives them makeup work, and even if they're really a hard worker, catching up those 3 days while they're trying to keep up, that was one thing. And the other one I was told by an administrator was it came down to money too, because out of school we don't get ADA, correct?
Correct.
On campus suspension we got ADA, we got money for it. So it was a twofold thing, and it really seemed to work well for a long time. I know a lot of sites it works great, but like you said, I've heard at some sites, I don't know if that's true now, but it was just a place to suspend kids and stick them in there and get them out of your hair.
And that's the hard part too. Is when you're at a comprehensive high school, when you have 2,200 kids, if every teacher, say just one teacher, right? Every teacher just want to get one kid out of their class for that day, that would be 110 kids who need to be in OCI or whatever you want to call it, and that's just impossible to do. So we have to really look at like those other measures of correction and other resources that are needed, like mental health clinicians and things like that, because kids need to be in class learning. They don't need to be in a room to where it's head down and don't do anything. So we want to make sure we.
OCI is a
But
tough job.
the mental health, remember I wanted the definition of what the counselors do and the one that does OCR. What do they actually do, to help these students that are in these rooms? But whenever you get a chance to do that. Okay.
No problem. Any other questions on?
Well, not really a question, but I know that Mr. Cole's student group, your advisory group, that was one of their concerns was OCI, that it's become, because you said, one student per teacher, 110 students, nobody's going to be able to handle that.
No.
So, and particularly they've been sent out for being unruly or whatever. Now you've got a whole bunch of them together, and so the students themselves have said that it's become a playland, and kids go there and plan things and all. So it is something we definitely need to look at. I agree, done properly with a small group, it can be very effective, but it's kind of probably turned into, from what the students are telling us, it's not meeting its needs at this point.
Correct.
Because even that parent mentioned it,
Yeah.
that kids were actually getting in trouble, so they could go to that room and they'd meet with their
it's like a
friends,
date.
For the day.
And here's the thing too, we're working on as we kind of get into the budget development, and we start in February to kind of, even in our own practices, about the goals of the district and what you kind of want to see as a board and that vision setting. As you think about those things that are kind of interwoven into the fabric, and you look at the things that work, mental health works with kids, and they're asking for it. They're asking for more mental health support. There's one mental health counselor at every school, right? And some schools have 1,000 kids, and some schools have over 2,000 kids, and it's the same ratio. I mean, it's not the same ratio, but we saw the same person there. One person has to serve 2,000 kids, and one serving 1,000. It's not enough.
I know.
Right, so we know we need more mental health support, right? Restorative practitioners, in the form of mental health support for students, so that we can avoid a lot of all of this. How do we fix this early? And so we're building that into the budget. You take the academic piece of it with Heritage, helping students understand the importance of A through G, increasing that level of rigor in our classrooms, for all students, but without somebody who's dedicated to work with kids on the importance of it, and actually an employee who understands that school, understands that community, it won't, they'll fall through the cracks. And so
Right.
we need to put these things into place. We're building that into the budgets. And actual things that will not, like this false sense of, hey, we're doing really good things. Instead, they're real interventions. People can really work towards behavior. How can we fix the behavior? What happens if the suspension's over? Right? You're going to come back to school after a fight. You know, we're meeting with the student for those restorative practices. Sometimes administration does it. Sometimes counselors do it. And if we're lucky, we get our mental health professional who's probably the most trained in it. But there's one per 2,000 kids. And so it's just building that program up. And I think as we look into the future, in the next year, continuing to build these programs up, doing the same and doing less isn't going to be enough. We have to do more. And that's under the heading of equity. Is to say, look, we have the data, we know where the holes are at, and how do we plug those in? So, and we'll continue these conversations as we kind of get into budget development of what next year can look like, about, you know, increasing, doubling, tripling our mental health, whatever we can get to afford. You know, just restorative practitioners potentially coming in and working with our kids. Somebody dedicated to, you know, the A through G, you know, components of really getting kids in the right courses so they don't fall through the cracks. We're seeing the success of these things, so why would we not double down on them?
Right. Where we have them at all the comprehensive high schools and alleviate some of that, some of the problems.
Sure.
But then also, once he finds the data of where we have the most in fights, whether it's at 7th and 8th grade, 9th grade, or what levels, once we get some of that data, perhaps we will know exactly where we should pinpoint in dealing with those.
Barbara, are you reading my mind, Barbara? Are you reading my mind?
No.
The reason why? Because if you turn to that next page with all the referral data on it, I'll tell you what grade level all these fights are happening at.
Well, we knew once. We knew it was the 9th grade, believe it or not.
Actually,
Junior high, 7th grade.
We knew it was the 9th grade. That's why we built that 9th grade campus that's right next to Silverado. That was supposed to be a 9th grade campus. And we felt if we dealt with 9th grade in smaller pods, we could actually keep them in school and we'd be able to help them psychologically. So that was a big deal for San Bernardino County to have a 9th grade campus at one point.
well, and what we're learning though, if you turn in, actually, I gave you this one. It's actually easier to read than what's on the slide deck. It's if you want to turn the next slide, please. It has the referral date on it. That was kind of fuzzy on there. So I gave you a hard copy. That's a loose one. It's a loose copy, Mr. Crosby.
Oh, yeah, is that what this is
Oh,
on
this
here?
is-
Yeah, it's
Oh,
easier to
this is a
read on
loose
there.
copy.
I was gonna say, because this isn't any.
Yeah.
And you guys, what is up with you guys and all this small writing?
Well, it's
I know that you got to get it all on
Saving
one
paper.
page.
trying to save paper.
do
I'm trying
that?
to save money.
I know.
So with that though, if you look though, and going back to your question, Barbara, actually though, you'll actually see though 7th grade on here. This goes the ed code violations down the left hand side, 48900A1, which is fights. You could actually see that our 7th grade actually has grown at 84 fights over last year. So 7th grade has an issue right now with fighting, physical aggression. 8th grade is not far behind it. But then if you look at our high school numbers, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, they're going actually in the other direction now. They're negative. So there's good things happening at the high school level,
Well, that's
but
why they switched it around.
yep. But again, going back to what you're saying though, right? So we're identifying now that 7th grade has some concerns. Either they don't know how to handle issues or problems. And like Mr. Coles is saying, bringing mental health clinicians onto those sites.
And you have to understand, we're getting kids from all the different areas. Victor Elementary, Atlanto, Helendale, Oregon. We're getting kids from everywhere else as well. So, yeah, we do need to just break down some data here and then zoom in on that data. And I know that when we did that one year with the 9th grade, you know, making all the pods and stuff, everything went down. In that whole class, everybody went up in testing and grades and everything. It's only because we made us smaller groups. And perhaps something like that has to happen with our 7th and 8th graders. You know, we need to zoom in on them.
Nope, I agree.
Yeah.
So when you look at this data here, though, it actually shows you all the green is actually we're going the right direction.
Yeah.
That means that we're having
Good.
less referrals based on whatever that ed code violation might be. You can also see if you go to the African American population tab, which is the AA tab, you can see that even referrals for African American students is actually going, for the most part, in the right direction with green, negative. There's less than last year. You will see, though, that we have had an increase in the 48900K violation. We've already talked about that before because we weren't tracking it correctly before. It's being marked as other kinds of intervention, or not interventions, but like, it was marked as gambling or horseplay or
Gambling.
But if the teachers aren't giving those suspensions, the school cannot give under K. So there shouldn't be anything under K unless it's coming from the teacher.
correct.
And yet the other slide showed us nothing's coming from the teacher.
Correct. Well, you got to remember, though, that we always want to make sure in K we have intervention first because that's what Ed Code says now, that anything that's a K violation, there should be some MTSS happening before you even get to that suspension.
For
component.
48900, but not 48910.
No, 910, you're correct.
So for the teacher, they can still give on K,
Yes.
but the others can't.
Well, and I think it goes back to what Rachel was saying, though, and I think Kenan brought it up too. I think the reason why is when I pull my data, it's for all-day suspensions, and the teacher can only give a period suspension. So that's probably why it's not coming across that way.
And I don't see any 48910s on here. So this wouldn't,
Well, 48910 is, remember, that's not for...
right, so that wouldn't be on this sheet.
No.
So we wouldn't be seeing that.
Yeah, these are just Ed Code.
Right,
Ed
right.
Code. What we would submit to the state of California on CalPads. Like
Right,
at the end of the
okay.
year, this is what we would upload to the state on what our discipline records were. 48910s would not be under this component because this is all Ed Code, just Ed Code violations. But like I said, when you can look at it, though, there's actually good data coming across. But there's areas of concern too. I'm not going to, we got to work on what we got to work on, like Barbara's saying. So if you look actually at that 48900K violation, we've had 363 referrals for that this year. Again, it's a little high because it wasn't tracked properly in the past. But you could look over across from that. Of those 363 K violations, 196 were for African American students. So that's where we have to have a conversation as far as what's happening there. What is that? Why is that a K violation? What's going on? What is it, right? And those are things, those deeper dives like Barbara you're talking about is why is this happening for this population of students? They're almost 2/3 of the referrals for K violations. So why? And honestly, we only have this year, I want to say we're about 18% of our students are African American. So by this number, which is 363, it's almost a 1 in 4 chance if you're African American, you're going to get a disruption defiance violation referral. Now, I get some of these are for the same kid over and over again. I know that. But just using that the numbers, the way the data looks, that's what it looks like. So we want to make sure we have those conversations with sites and teachers. And what can we do to, again, mental health clinicians to resolve some of these issues, right? Because some of our kids are coming to school, they're hungry. Some are coming to school with no electricity. They're coming to school with trauma from home because they got kicked out by their parents the night before. And now they're, there's all these things that happen, and we got to kind of figure out the root cause of why that's happening. Some kids, they just need to have some discipline, and I'll admit that wholeheartedly. They just come in, they already have everything. But there's some kids have trauma, and we got to help support that trauma to make sure that we're identifying it and giving the support they need to be successful.
Right. Some of them can declare, well, they actually can declare themselves independent of their parent if they're 16. Yeah.
And then with that, so a couple of other high points on this, and again, I have them here. So for example, we've had some good data in our reduction in 48900.4s, which is hostile school environment. And that was one of the things that OCR actually kind of drove on, is that they felt that there shouldn't be that many hostile school environments. But we feel that they felt that in the past that K violations were being identified as hostile school environments. So we've identified that and we've corrected that measure. Now we still have some. I'm not gonna say they don't. We take care of those when they come across. But we're now identifying things a little bit more correctly in our record keeping. But we have a reduction in that. 48900.2, that also has a reduction going on with it. So that's also a great thing because that's sexual harassment, right? We want to make sure all of our girls, our boys, they're being treated fairly at school and they're not being, exposed to things they shouldn't be exposed to. So those things are going in the right direction. And 48900.82, which is the very top, this is the bigger assault with force. We've actually had less of those. Now we've had an increase in fights overall, but the bigger fights was like kids being jumped, kids being, assaulted on the ground. Those have actually been reduced. We've had a couple pop up here and there, but by historical data, it's actually less than what we've had in the past. So we have some.
So is it mostly women again, girls?
We've actually have seen an increase this year in girl fights this year for whatever
For
reason.
years now, we've had a lot of more girls involved in it than ever before. I don't know what that's about, but Seems to be a lot of women, girls.
Yeah, and that's one of the
Get 'em
things
up
I
for
know that we're
wrestling,
looking at.
heck.
We're actually looking at too, though, is like I said, bringing in some of those girl empowerment groups, like the life psychology
Maybe we
came
can
last week,
start that.
bringing
Some
them
kind of
in to
women-
do some
girls
stuff
group.
with our girls at our middle schools to eliminate some of that behavior because it's difficult, you know, where girls will hold on to things a little longer sometimes, and that, you know, it festers, right? And then
No
so
way.
it just doesn't stop. So we want to make sure we solve those problems first and forehand. And then lastly on this, some things we want to work on, which again, we're already aware of. And again, some of this is just because we actually doing record keeping correctly now. The 4900Ks, we got to work on that, especially for African American students. We got to figure out what's going on there. 4900Bs, we have seen an increase in weapons on campus. Now they're not being used, not being brandished, they're not being, you know, used for anything else. But kids are not feeling safe in their communities. They're walking home from school. And so, you know, they
That's
might
not a
get
good
stopped
thing.
for something because a friend knows, hey, Jose has a knife on him. The kid's not doing anything with it, but they go pick the kid up, search him, because we got to make sure the campus is safe, and he does have it on him. And when you find out and you talk to the parent, like, oh, hey, he walks home from Silverado at 4:30 in the afternoon, it's dark, he goes down this street, yes, I told him to carry a knife. So we're not going to expel that kid for that. We understand that. We do let the student know they are still suspended, of course, and, you know, here's the consequence if they don't correct the behavior, because we want a safe campus. But we're getting more of that as far as, you know, more and more kids who are bringing pepper sprays and tasers and things to school, but not to do it against their staff, their school members, but to get home safely or to walk down the street or whatever it might be. So that's an issue that we got to kind of figure out. I don't know what the answer is at the moment, but again, we are seeing an uptick as far as weapons on campus. But again, not to be used on staff or students, but just in their possession because of the concern about walking home and safety.
Well, that's
So-
the problem with possession. You know, I'm sitting next to Johnny. Oh, Johnny's got something. I'll
Mm-hmm.
take it out of Johnny's bag. I didn't intend to use it, but the person that took it does. You know, that's the problem. If it's on campus, it's a potential threat.
Exactly, and that's why I said that's why we collect them, we confiscate them, we throw them to law enforcement, and we still suspend the kid who brought it. But again, though, should that kid be expelled for something like that, where their parents giving that thing? It's a case by case scenario because it depends on, of course, on the history of that student. But again, though, some kids are just good kids and they're just trying to make it to survive, and so we want to make sure that we do discipline. We do the consequences appropriately, and then we educate. We educate and train and move forward on that. So,
Yeah, we don't want them to take that in their hands. We want to train them to be able to go to a safe
That's
space and tell
dangerous.
someone and
Yep.
keep them safe, but not to take that into their own hands.
exactly. And I think that's one of the things actually Barbara was talking about earlier is about more community stuff, to getting what is going on in the community, to help educate, to help solve some of these problems, right? Because that's where I think we're at sometimes when the community feels that we're not listening, and not just, I don't mean us, I just mean, you know, law enforcement or society is not listening, they take into their own hands, right? Okay, well, I'm going to have to carry something because no one's going to listen to me. So it's good, again, trying to figure out ways to solve that problem moving forward.
And the time has changed with schools, and it's darker and bleak out there. Oh my God.
And the last one, again, I want to make sure we do
Grew up in.
focus on.
Yeah.
The last one I do want to focus on, though, too, that we had talked about, I know that Mr. Crosby and Mr. Barros were in that student voice meeting, which is 4900Cs, which is a possession of controlled substance. There's been a huge increase in that, and I think a lot of it has to do with accessibility. Again, I'm taking any statistics on it, but it's because it's accessible. Vape pens with marijuana in them and other items on them. Kids are bringing them to campus. You know, we've heard it from the students saying, hey, I can walk down the hallway and I can smell it. It's here, it's wherever. And again, as law is changed in California to where it now takes, 1 ounce of marijuana to be put up for expulsion, unless it's a continuous behavior issue. We have to do remedies, mental health condition, the impacts of, drugs on your system, education again, educating of why you shouldn't be doing this. But we have seen, like I said, an increase in controlled substance on campus, but a lot of it's based on vape. It's vape and those little cartridges that have like the THC that's built into it or whatever it is. And those are the things that we have to figure out as a community. And again, not at school, but overall, how do we address that? Because kids are taking to school. Sometimes, I'll be honest with you, parents come up to see me for expulsion, and they're like, oh, hey, can I get my vape pen back? And I'm like, no, law enforcement has it now. Again, it's accessibility. We got to figure out ways to educate families to keep things away that kids shouldn't have, and educate kids on
See,
the dangers of it.
that's one of the problems, is some of the families are involved in it. I mean, we confiscated 91
It's easier to see.
different groups
And if you
with
want to staple that,
illegal type drugs, you know, so,
I took this one.
right here.
Stapled that one in. If you want to staple
So part of it is the families that they're coming from too.
that one right there.
No, and I said that's where education's so important, you know, across the board. You know, more mental health clinicians, more resources,
Is
more
it
parent
cold in here
workshops.
or am I cold?
No, I agree with you.
It's cold in here. It's blowing down cold air. Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. So with that though, that does conclude our OCR
guys
updates. Where we're at right now, the progress we've made, where we're going from here.
Thank you. Thank you very
Any
much.
other questions for me or ideas?
I have just a statement, it's not really a question. One of my concerns is, as you know, all 4 of my kids graduated from this school district, and I'm very proud of that. One of my concerns is, though, that when we say, well, these kids are bringing these weapons to campus, but they're not planning on using them, okay, I never felt comfortable playing God. I don't know what the kid really thinks. I know when a kid brings the knife, well, it's for protection. I'll never use it. Although I had some kids sit there and say, anybody crosses me, I'm ready to use it and I'll kill them. Well, okay, you know.
That's the scary part.
Yeah, that's
You never
scary.
know.
But when we say that we have to understand that, I don't know that I wanted my daughters on campus knowing that there's weapons and that we're gonna sit there and say, well, we're trying to understand your mind, okay, or my son even. Although, you know, maybe my son could have taken care of himself a little more, but he may have been the one who would have died because he would have been more confrontational. And so and yet we've got to include the mental health experts on this, but still a weapon is a weapon. And when we know that a kindergartner shoots his teacher, you know, and now all of a sudden we're sitting there saying, well, you know, it's only a knife. People die with knives.
6-year-old.
And so it's not an easy thing. And I was a principal. I will tell you, it's a very difficult thing because some kids, you know, they won't use it. And there's other kids you might have question about. But if you treat them differently,
Yep.
then you got a problem with OCR. You know, they're going to say, wait, you treated these 2 people differently, and so you got, it's a tough thing. And our principals are faced with some, not just all administrators, are faced with a very, very difficult decision here and what they do. But if we have a death, if we have a murder on campus, it's gonna come back and haunt us and say, well, you know, maybe we should have been more strict on this. So it's just something I don't have an answer for. I just don't. You've got to treat kids the same, but kids aren't the same, you know, and weapons are weapons. So it's just something that I liked what Mr. Cole came up with, maybe have a screening machine, you know, at each site. And then that way, if somebody walks through and they have a knife on them or something, then we immediately pull them aside, you know, and we talk to them, we do that, and we don't have to expel.
Yep.
But it is gonna, if we have one murder on campus, it is gonna be ugly, and people are gonna say, why didn't you do more? And that's one of my concerns, so.
No, and I agree with you 100%. It's one of those tricky slopes we're on right now. And it's not just even our district, it's
No,
across the states, across the
nationwide.
country. And again, I don't know what the answer is either. It's just trying to take each case by case, right? And again, it's hard. I agree with you. Like, I don't know what's in that kid's mind. We've had to tell them where they come across, and some kids, they went camping with their dad that weekend. It was their weekend to have their dad weekend, right? They're divorced. They went camping. They put their pocket knife to go camping. They forgot to take it out when they came back. I mean, it's so hard because you're like you said, you're playing judge, jury, and everything on this, and you're trying to figure out what's the intent in the end. And so I understand where you're coming from completely. And I like the idea, of course, adding other avenues in there to make sure they just don't even get on campus at all, right? Because then that eliminates a lot of things. So again, I hear you, and we'll keep tackling this approach as we go forward on it. So totally understand.
Other than that, great job. Thank you. Very informative. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
nice job. Any other questions or comments? Well, actually, I'm going to come to you for comments in just a moment. But any questions on the report? Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, well, I'll go to board member comments. Jose?
Well, nothing much, just that, you know, we've gone over all this, so now at least me, I have a better understanding of a little bit of the things, because some of them, like I said, you know, some of the sites, you ask certain administrators, we're told we can't, suspend people. Well, sometimes you have to do that. Other sites, I was just looking at some of the numbers, and one site has a ton of suspensions, but they have the same number as a school half their size. Now, if that's right, then there's something wrong, when you've got 1,000 more students and you have the same number of suspensions. And that's why I asked that one question, does anybody track incidences? Because the idea of suspension from way back when was to try to correct behavior. So if doing this doesn't correct behavior, we got to go to Plan C, whatever that is, because, if we have control of our campuses, scores will go up, less fights, more positive, street appeal, so to speak, okay? Curb appeal, all right? Because people don't want to send there's still people in the community that don't want their kids to go to Victor Valley High School. And Kent had 3 of yours went there, right? Okay? And, it's a great place. I taught there for years. I thought it was a good place, but there's other people that think this bad stuff happens. Adelanto's had kids go to Ivy League schools. Well, okay, some of the other schools, I don't think they've had that. Some of our premier schools haven't had that, all right, to be quite blunt. All right, so I still think we're doing a good job, and now we have to do it and get the same result and keep an outside entity happy so they think we're, wonderful. The end.
Okay, Mr. Crosby?
Well, I'm very grateful for the insight here, and I know both Mike and Rachel, Mr. Cole, everybody involved here, there aren't easy solutions to this, and there is nothing that's going to stop. We still have to deal with our society, and our society is having more and more problems too, and so we have to deal with that. But thank you so much for all this information that you gave us, and for the ideas that are coming forth as we meet and stuff like that, and will continue to come forth. And thank you guys for your time that you put into this, Mike, Rachel particularly, but for everybody, but particularly for you two. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Barbara?
Thank you. I actually requested this so that the new members would be able to understand where we are and see where we are. Because I was getting it like hit and miss, kind of. And I mentioned it to Mr. Cole that we need to have a workshop in this so we can all be on the same boat, doing the same thing, roaring the same way. And I also want to assist in this one to make sure that we're doing everything, So I will be talking to you, and I'll talk to Mr. Cole as well.
Okay, Rosie?
Yeah, I also would like to thank you for all the work that went into this. It's really an eye-opener. I'm just thankful that the district is doing something to take care of the problem, not only past problems, but to ensure that it doesn't happen down the road, and that we keep ORC happy, and we can only keep them happy by not having anything like this occur again. It's a shame that it's taken so long for this to come to light, and then all of a sudden, what we should have done way back when, we didn't. And I'm sure glad to see that the district is working very hard to get this taken care of. I think it's important for our students, whatever race they are, to make sure that they're all treated equally. It's no fun going to school when you're treated differently. I can attest to that. Coming from Oro Grande, we didn't have those problems. When I first went to Victor Elementary School, I found out how shielded we were in Oro Grande.
Yeah.
The Crystal Plunge. They had a sign there at the gate, said no blacks, no dogs, and no Mexicans. We thought, well, it's okay. I can't swim anyway. But we were more disturbed because the dogs got higher billing than we did.
Yeah.
But yeah, we learned all about that prejudice when I started junior high school at Victor Valley Junior High, and what a difference coming from Oro Grande, where we were all the same. I mean, yes, we had black families there, Mexicans. It was mostly Mexicans and maybe 6 or 8 black families, we didn't know they were black. We just thought they were from a different part of Mexico. You know, we just thought they were a little darker because they were from maybe, you know, south, further south than where we were from. And yeah, so I think something like this is really, really important. And I think we're headed in the right direction. And I commend the district for the work that they're doing on this. So, thank you.
Well, Mr. Coles, I appreciate what you said when we started this session about how we have to acknowledge what happened. And we have to be very understanding of how we need to get a culture change and how it's going to take time, but I appreciate we have good people working on it. And I appreciate the board is open-hearted to recognize that these changes need to happen, and we need to make sure that they do. That we'll work as a team of 6, and actually a team of over 1,000 employees
Pretty much.
and over 11,000 students. We're all one big family and team, so we'll all work together. I appreciate that. Thank you for your hard work. And Rachel, I wanted to talk to you after. Okay. All right, Mr. Coles.
You know, as I've gotten to know all of you, and to hear your stories of transformation that's taking place, just to hear across the tracks, no Mexicans, no dogs, no blacks, and each of you have different stories of discrimination, that's taking place up here. And I feel your pain. I feel a lot of people's pain in what's happened over this. And I think the true test of any organization is going to be if we have the wherewithal to come out of this even stronger. Some of the stuff that we've started to look at to putting into place, to kind of address these measures, they're real. And hopefully we see the results. I can't ever guarantee an outcome. I can't do it. I don't think any of us can guarantee an outcome. We can guarantee that we're going to take action, we're going to take things and put steps in place to do this. As you know, last board meeting, you guys passed a resolution kind of committing to exploring and continuing the exploration of a new middle school next year. We're seeing fights at 7th grade, right? That means that we're going to have smaller class sizes. We're going to have smaller schools, right? We can address it that way. Talked about a team of 11,000. There's nobody who's opposed to a new middle school. Not a single person. The unions are completely on board. They're supporting smaller class sizes. And those are real measures for real things that can really happen to kind of start to mitigate a greater connection between our teachers and students, okay, between our classified staff. We're looking at increasing mental health at each of our campuses. If students have things going on, telling them to just do better isn't going to work. It doesn't work. So we have to find ways to give them the strategies to cope with anger, to cope with whatever it is that they're going through. So if they go through it, it doesn't happen again. Restorative practices are going to be essential in the work we do, but without the right teams and the right people in place, it will not happen. Increase to the heritage program, right? We know that it works. It catches kids at a particular level, and it gives them the support that they need so that they can be successful and take the right classes and no one will fall through the cracks, especially our minority groups who may not all have the skills and the understanding of the importance of these classes. And it starts to prepare them for everything they're going to need beyond high school. We're also looking at the professional development. I hear you loud and clear, each of you, that we are looking for somebody with a focus who knows this area and who can make a real difference in the work that we do. So after this needs assessment is done, we'll be looking for a trainer that knows the community and can make a difference. It might even be right here, homegrown in this area. We're also looking at, and you had mentioned it, there's a team of us going down on Monday to look at another school district at Hemet who's implemented an Evolve screening system. And it's a system that will catch students with weapons, and it's an artificial intelligence system that will also start to pick up on vapes. If they have vapes and they have weapons, we'll catch it at the door. Okay, and we can work through it there, providing a safer environment at all of our school sites. And as I kind of look to the future, is kind of alluded to it, but really it's about the trainers, right? That's going to be the most powerful piece. The needs analysis is the base. The work that really will take place is ongoing professional development, and it may be trainers that will continue to do it throughout the district, throughout the whole year, not just one and done, but actually provide professional development on implicit bias and what that translates and what that looks like in practice, and it continues, not just a 1 day or 1 hour training. That we continue to provide accurate reporting data, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, that we use that data and we drive the decision from it. Without accurate data, you are all at an unfair advantage to make decisions if we provide you with inaccurate data. So for us to provide you with transparent, accurate data every month on our suspension rates, based on our subgroups and where we're at. And then also a commitment that if we set up outreaches to churches and different organizations, especially in the black community, I will be there. We will be there. We will stand in front of this as we have done. Nobody will ever sugarcoat this and say that it's not as bad as it is. It is bad. It is bad. And we have to acknowledge it, which we have done, and now we need to do something about it and to continue to do that. And so I look forward to setting that up with any other leaders out there. That one's mine this time.
I thought it was his again.
I know it wasn't mine.
And but we will continue to do this. And so I hope what you do see is that we do have actions in step. This will never be a 30-year mortgage. It can't be, because things that we put in place now may not work in a year from now. We have to continue to evolve, continue to change based on our systems, what works, what doesn't, and so you have our full commitment for that. But I'm really proud of the work that's taken place. Regarding the OCR, where we're at, the work that we continue to need to do, but it's bigger than that. There's nobody here that says, let's just get through the OCR piece and then just put this behind us. Everybody is on board with, once we finish the OCR, that's just the beginning, it's not the end. I don't want to sit here 3, 4, 5 years from now and say, hey, we're back at it again. I don't want to do that. You don't want us to do that. And so we're going to have to get it right, and get it right for good. And I think that we're going to be able to do that. And I know that you have full commitment with it, and you have an oversight to that, and you have a responsibility to that. So proud to learn and proud to work right along all of you. So thank you.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone wants to use this to staple that last page on that replaced the smaller print one? I'll leave my stapler, or I'll hand it down.